Alright, happy weekend to you guys. It's Friday, November 18th, 2011. I'm going to do one of my regular rambling political videos that's usually all over the map, so bear with me. Also, the computer's acting kind of funny also, so there's another reason to bear with me. But anyway, take a look at this. This is a news article, and it says, "Why are the Cubans learning Chinese?" Now guys, if you think about it logically, why would the Cubans want to learn Chinese? Okay, there's nothing there in Cuba except communism. They have no business, they have nothing. They're impoverished, deliberately made to be impoverished by over 50 years of Castro and his thugs. So why would Cubans suddenly be learning Chinese? Now, according to this article, it says hundreds of Cubans are enrolling in Mandarin Chinese classes as China's role in the island's economy is expanding. The Asian giant is now Cuba's second largest trading partner. I don't know what Cuba has to trade, but anyway, they're the second largest trading partner. And students want to grasp the language, blah, 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 blah. Okay, very short article. Now, again, like I said, since there's nothing there in Cuba, what does that tell you? Well, I'll tell you what it tells me under the surface. They're putting up this type of stuff to make, the usual spin on it. Oh, they're there for economic reasons. Well, there's nothing there economically in Cuba, number one. Number two, if the Chinese need any sort of workforce for economic reasons, they have their own population of 1.3 billion people to choose from, many of which still do not have a job in China. But this schmoozy article here says that the Cubans, the Chinese are now in Cuba for economic reasons. Bullshit. Okay, kind of like when the Russians were in Cuba. Were they there for economic reasons? Yeah, right. Does 1962 ring a bell? Yeah, we all know what went down in with the missiles of October, so to speak, okay? So the bottom line to this is, what this tells me is that the Chi-Coms are now in Cuba. Why do you think they're there, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, well, we all know why they're there, all right? Posturing. I mean, it's not like you had Chinese submarines firing missiles off the coast of Los Angeles or any activity like that. So heads up, East Coast. You've got the Chi-Coms moving into Cuba, especially you guys in Florida. Heads up, Florida. Well, let's move on. Let me see what else I got for you today. And, well, while we're on the subject of China, let's see. Here we go. Here's an article. China and Rwanda are celebrating their 40th anniversary of diplomatic ties. Oh, isn't that sweet? Rwanda? Isn't that where they've had all sorts of civil war and genocide in the African continent? But there's China. China is in Africa also. What else do we have? Here's the Chinese connection in Africa, and it goes on. Well, the bottom line is, why is China in Africa? China is all over Africa, and they've been all over Africa because they're sucking the blood of Africa dry for all its resources, especially oil, but as well as all the other minerals. Now, what that means is the African people get jack shit. They don't get anything. They get no money. Only their vicious dictators, their corrupt, filthy, vicious dictators, rake in the millions and the billions, and the African people themselves don't get jack shit, nor have they gotten anything for decades, even though this is their country, this is their wealth, and it belongs to the African people. But here's China, okay, like a giant mosquito sucking the blood out of Africa. Let me move on. You know, here's Rwanda, the Rwandan genocide of 1994. 800,000 people were murdered. Now, the Clinton administration didn't do anything. They just sat on their duff and shrugged their shoulders. And I remember this back in 1984, watching video footage of this, where you had like lines of young mothers holding their babies in their hands along the side of a roadway as these murderers came in to hack them to pieces with machetes. Of course, they stopped the film just as the machete's coming down on them. Okay, 800,000. That's a genocide. Under the United Nations Charter, if genocide occurs, they must intervene. Boy, that's a giant fucking spider. They must intervene if genocide occurs. So, of course, the United Nations, which is mainly made up of dictators and attitudinal socialists and communists, did nothing. And the Clinton administration did nothing. Now, why is it that the United States will not intervene in Africa? Well, in my personal opinion, one of the reasons why is China. Because China is all over Africa. And if the United States or if the United Nations sends in troops to some of these African countries, what that means is they may be in direct conflict with Chinese troops who are there protecting the Chinese oil rigs, okay, the Chinese mining operations. Because with all this civil war, all this genocide going on, do you think that the Chinese are just going to go in there unarmed and allow themselves to be shot to pieces? Of course they're not going to do that. You know that they got PLA troops there. They may be wearing civilian clothes. It may be the Chinese communist version of Blackwater, but there it is. Let me see what else we got here. So that kind of flows into, let me see, here. Now, a lot of you guys have already heard this news, but it's worth reiterating. Now the Obama administration announces U.S. troops going into Australia. So now we're moving into their hemisphere. Now, do you think that the Chinese communists are going to sit around and allow this to happen without reaction? I'm telling you folks, start looking to see 1962 all over again. Okay, as this begins to heat up, you're going to see China moving into Cuba in a huge way. That's my opinion. Because they're not going to sit by and allow this. I mean, this is obvious posturing, and the Chinese communists have always proven that they're going to rise to the occasion. Do you guys remember when George Bush got elected in his first term, and as soon as, not long after he moved into the White House on his first term, do you remember the U.S. Navy reconnaissance plane? And the Chinese forced it to land on one of their islands. And of course they're crawling all over that thing like ants. Then, even though the plane was capable of flying away, they made sure that we had to come in, dismantle it into pieces, and ship it out that way, just so they could rub our noses in their Chinese shit in front of the whole world. So this is how they are. They're not afraid. They don't give a fuck. Okay? They still have troops nearby. They back North Korea, right? North Korea cannot exist without China. North Korea gets 80% of everything from China. Remember that it was Chinese troops in the 1950s that flowed across the border and shot dead American soldiers. Okay? Let's move on. What else do we have? Let's see. All right. Well, anyway, as we're on the subject here of my dear friends, the communists, of course I'm kidding. I want you guys to look at this, and you should pass it around. And what this is this is the Congressional record of 1963. And what it's doing is it's documenting the goals of communism as they documented it in 1963. Now, to age this thing, what you could do is ask yourself, how old were you in 1963? What were you doing? Also, the main point is, read these goals, look at what it was in 1963, and see how far they have come in destroying this country using these goals. I'll just, I'll give you some examples here. Where is it? I mean, you can just go right down the checklist. Grant recognition of Red China. Admission of Red China to the United Nations. Check. Got that. Let's see. Allow all Soviet satellites to be represented. Because this is 1963, you're going to see a lot of references to the Cold War that no longer exist, but there's an awful lot of stuff here that is relevant and has been achieved that, you know, probably wasn't thought as being possible in 1963. Promote the United Nations as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is written, demand that it be set up as a one-world government. Okay, that's number 11. Objective number 11. Demand that the United Nations be set up as a one-world government. This is 1963, folks. Okay, with its own independent armed forces. Some communist leaders believe the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other and are doing it now in the Congo. Again, this is 1963. Resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. Do away with loyalty oaths. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. Do away with that. Okay, I do solemnly swear to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Get rid of that shit. Okay, that's number 13 on the list. Capture one or both of the political parties of the United States. The two-headed monster, Republican, Democrat Party, there's really no difference between them. They've captured both of them. Okay? Use the courts to weaken the basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. Check. Ain't that right, Sotomayor? Right? Supreme Court Justice. This is where policy is made. Remember that? Use student riots to foment public protest against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. Number 20, infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writings, and policy-making decisions. Number, where is it? Number 21, gain control of key positions in radio, television, and the motion pictures. It just goes on and on, folks. You know, I'm going to move on. I'm going to try and cut this video short, so make sure you read this. Make sure you pass it around. What else do I have for you? Now here we go. Let's see what we got. Nope, not that one. Okay. This article, this goes back to 2008, but just to let you know, the president of Argentina, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, excuse me. Well, she just got re-elected recently, and she's, of course, another lawyer, kind of like Fidel Castro. What was Fidel Castro before he was a vicious dictator that murdered people by firing squads and confiscated all their wealth? Well, he was a lawyer, of course. So here we have another lawyer, and her husband, who I believe recently passed away, he too was a lawyer. Well, she just got re-elected. Okay? Now, what was it the two of them did before the election in order to gain the support of the people of Argentina in order to get reelected? Well, I'm showing you. What they did was they confiscated everybody's retirement funds in Argentina. Okay, they confiscated everybody's retirement pension funds right there. Read it for yourself. The government did. The socialist, Marxist, authoritarian Marxist government of Argentina, these two rich, wealthy lawyers, took everybody's pension accounts for the collective good of the people. Now, if they can do it in Argentina, oh buddy, as the situation gets worse in the United States, you can bet they're going to be looking to do the same thing here, especially once Obama gets reelected, and you better believe he's getting reelected. Speaking of retirement funds, here we go. You guys probably heard of this. The new retirement age, how about 80 years old? Is 80 the new 65? Okay, you see what they're doing? You see what they're doing, folks? Okay, this is the third world. This is how dictators stay in power in third world countries forever. If you look all across the Middle East, all the dictators they've had in the Middle East for the last 50 years, if you look at all the dictators across Central and South America, if you look at all the dictators across Africa, right? Look at those countries, and what do you see in common? Well, what you see in common is a very young population. Well, why are they young? Because all the old people are fucking dead. There's very few, small population of old people in these third world countries. And why is that? Well, there's going to be no health care, so that means there's going to be no life-saving operations. There's no life-saving medications. And most of all, there's no retirement. You will work until you fucking die. Okay? That's what's coming. All right? What was it the Nazis put above the concentration camps in Dachau and Auschwitz? What was it said? Arbeit macht frei. Right? Work will set you free. Work makes you free. And that's what's coming, folks. This is why they're going after everybody's retirements. Now, all you guys, prior to some of this information coming along, were motherfucking so-called public employees. By the way, notice how the media never mentions who the public employees are. It's kind of like when they use the word collateral damage, they dehumanize it. Well, of course, public employees are teachers, correctional officers, right? Firefighters, and of course, cops. And all the folks jumping around, yeah, let's get those public employees, because I hate fucking cops. Okay? Well, guess what? Now they're coming after your retirements. All you veterans, right? Coming after all the veteran benefits. They're coming after all the veteran retirements, and you probably already read in the news stories where they're trying to jack the age of retirement for new military members, right? Who the fuck is going to stay in the military, risk life and limb for 20 fucking years, be lucky if they survive 20 years, only to be told, no, you can't collect your retirement check until you're 65, 70, 75, or even fucking 80 years old. Who's going to do that? Nobody. And that's another step into the weakening and the destroying of the United States military. Let's move on. Now, as we are discussing financial situations here in the United States, this one is still in progress, by the way. I still haven't found out the end result here. I'm guessing this is going to be stopped. Fingers crossed it's going to be stopped now that this has been made public. But what this is the United States government wants to give this company called Severstal, quote unquote, a loan for, let me scroll down here, folks, right there, Severstal in July received conditional approval for a $730 million loan. Okay, $730 million. Well, there's only one problem with this, ladies and gentlemen. This is a Russian company. This is not an American company. This is fucking Russian. And I think this is the picture of this darling here. This gentleman here, who's the company owner, he is worth $18.5 billion. 18.5. He is a billionaire 18 times over, and here we have our wonderful politicians wanting to give this foreign Russian company $730 million of your money. Now, math is my worst subject, but how about if we do this? There's 300 million people in the United States. Now, if we get rid of the 15 million illegal aliens, we don't give them any money, and the 1%ers, all the way up to the 10%ers of millionaires and billionaires, we don't need to give them money. How about if, to stimulate our economy, we took $730 million of our own money, and the government gave it to every American, let's say, well, $2 million each tax-free. Do you think that maybe that would stimulate the United States economy? Do you think that maybe people could pay off their houses? Do you think that people who are stuck in apartments, who dream of owning a house, could go out and buy a house if they were given $2 million tax-free of their own money? But no, that's not what the elites want. The elites want to give away $730 million to a Russian billionaire who's a billionaire 18 times over. What else do we have? Done that. Anyway, I'm gonna be posting the links, of course, to all this, and jumping back to China for 1 second. Let me bring this thing up here. Let me show you something real quick. This right here, okay, I'm acting like Feinstein right now. Anyway, this right here is a Mac 90. All right, now the reason you cannot go down to the gun store right now to get one of these rifles, the Chinese Mac 90, is that, you know, I meant to look up the article before I made the video, but the reason you cannot get it is for one reason, and that is, I believe it was around 1997 or so, Customs intercepted a shipment of Mac 90 rifles that were fully automatic, if I remember correctly, and it was, I want to say, the port of Long Beach, or perhaps the port of Oakland in California, fully automatic AKs. Now what became of that is Clinton used it as another excuse for gun control. So he banned all these rifles, and that's the reason you can no longer own these. Now, what begs the question is that it was never investigated as to who the rifles were going to. Now, at the time, what they said was the rifles were intended to go to the gangs of Los Angeles. All right, now, no matter how you slice that, let's take a look at that. That sounds to me like Fast and Furious Part 1. Right? Kind of like the Mexican drug cartels. They were going to give the Mexican drug cartels There was going to be all this carnage, all this death, so that they could continue to ban assault rifles and ban guns in general. Okay? And they got caught, thanks to some very patriotic ATF agents who blew the whistle on them. But here we are in 1997, okay? And they get caught. The Chinese get caught bringing in fully automatic rifles, and they said they were intended for the gangs of Los Angeles. So that sounds to me like that's what they wanted in 1997 also. They wanted all this death and carnage in 1997 by the gangs of LA so that they could pass more gun control and assault rifle bills, blah, 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 blah. But that didn't happen. Now, the question is how many rifles came in before they got intercepted? How many rifles came in after the shipment was intercepted? Okay? And here's another thing to think about. Are there Chinese sleeper cells in the United States? That's all I'm asking. Anyway, I'm going to end it here. It's Friday, beginning of the weekend, and thanks for watching.